So let's talk about faith and its correlate, hope. I'll say up front, I don't want to deprive anyone of an approach to faith that works for you. I'm going to speak very personally. And I'm going to start with some things that I think faith isn't, which get in my way, and may get in your way too. Take what's helpful. So the first thing, faith isn't a divine insurance policy, protection against bad things, a guarantee of a happy ending. Although I confess, sometimes I lean on that fantasy. Faith can sometimes say, I may think something is bad because of my limited perspective, but really, gam ze l'tova. This too is for the good, a blessing in disguise. Sometimes that works for me. There's an appealing humility in that. After all, right, there is a lot I don't understand, but it definitely has its limits. Sometimes no happy ending seems worth the price paid. And I'm just not okay saying that someone's terrible suffering is a blessing in disguise, much less an expression of justice, no matter what Unatana Tokef says. Faith, religion, spirituality can't keep bad things from happening. And it can't satisfactorily explain why we suffer. What it can do is help us figure out what to do with our suffering, how to live meaningfully and joyfully in an uncertain, scary, and heartbreaking world, how to sustain hope, and how to keep working for the good in the world. That's number one. Second, faith isn't unwaveringly constant, like a thing that I have or that I don't. A yes-no deal, right? It's something I work at. And it needn't be, I would suggest maybe it shouldn't be, intellectually, conceptually consistent. A life of faith is full of contradictions and paradoxes and mysteries. Is God a being? For me, sometimes yes, sometimes no. When I pray to a being. It makes prayer possible for me. I need someone to be talking to. But when I look for God to manifest in the world, or I use a term like redemption, I don't expect to encounter a being who's going to step in and intervene and fix things. The third thing, I want to spend some time on this. Faith doesn't need to be intellectually consistent for sure, but neither is it irrational or necessarily otherworldly, right? Like I have to bracket science and my brain and believe something of which there's no evidence, right? We have plenty of that in the world, by the way. It's nothing to do with faith, right? Faith emerges from mystery, which is different. And there is a mysterious aspect to everything we encounter in the real world. I read an article recently, a fabulous piece by an author named Martin Butler about this. And here's what he says. He says, the spiritual is a layer of meaning, often fleetingly perceived, that envelops the human world. We become acutely aware of this dimension of reality when entranced by a piece of music, moved by a great work of art, or overcome with love for someone, engrossed in a work of literature, moved by an awe-inspiring landscape, or witnessing profoundly heroic or altruistic action. It's the spiritual that ultimately makes our lives worth living because we recognize it as intrinsically valuable. It can come, no doubt, through meditation or prayer, through work, companionship, in celebration, or in the face of tragedy or great adversity. Now, Butler is saying here about faith what Palmer is saying about the aspiration side of the tragic gap. It's not fantasy. It emerges from what we have known. Theologians sometimes call this normal mysticism. Yes, life challenges faith. It can make hope seem foolish, ridiculous, or just too risky. But life also includes moments in which we intuit that what we do matters, and that striving for truth and kindness and justice and love is worthwhile. Now, this is one of the ways that the Jewish concept of Olam Haba, which we sometimes think of as the world to come, the afterlife, right? A better way to understand it is this way. It's not the world to come like some subsequent time period. It literally means the world that is coming, constantly coming, a dimension of reality now that coexists with how we perceive the world and periodically breaks through, right? In other words, it is the intuition for the life of the spirit that emerges from what already is. Butler, in his article, gives a fabulous example. And the example is how we actually encounter other people. So he says, right, we don't primarily see someone we meet as a set of amazingly complex biochemical and biomechanical processes. We see a person, a unique and infinite universe to itself, right? If you look at the person next to you, you will automatically perceive a structure with meaning and value beyond the sum of its parts. You perceive coherence, and precious coherence at that. Faith, relationship to God, if you want to use God language, is like that, but writ large. It's the intuition that everything partakes of a coherent whole, infinitely precious, with meaning and value beyond the sum of its parts. And faith becomes a grounding for hope when we hold the two competing views of reality as in fact as real and significant as they both are. The senseless hatred and violence and suffering, and also the intuition of goodness and meaning, indestructible, persistent, with a value beyond the sum of its parts. The cynic, who credits only the senseless part as, quote, real, will end up with nothing to hold on to. A dim view of life as nasty, brutish, and short, right? Like the old joke about the restaurant, right? The food is terrible and the portions are so small, right? The idealist who sees only the goodness we'll end up with a paper-thin Hallmark card kind of faith, in which God is puppies and sunshine and all the pretty things, but nowhere to be found in our pain and suffering. Neither is sustaining. The challenge is beautifully captured in the poem by Leah Goldberg that I gave you on the front page of the yellow sheets. The moon sings to the stream. I am the unity on high. I am multiple in the pond. Looking up to me from the stream, my image, my double. I am the truth on high. I am the fabrication in the pond. Looking up to me from the stream, my image in its faded deception. Above, I am enwrapped in silence, whispering, singing in the pond. On high, I am divine. In the stream, I am the prayer. God isn't only the unity, the truth, the perfection above. God is also in the divided, distorted, messy image below. This is the classical rabbinic concept of Shekhinah, of the aspect of God who dwells among and within us and who hurts and suffers when we do. A sustainable faith sits in the both end, not only holding but loving the light on high and the faded deception below. This is, of course, why the tragic gap is so heartbreaking. It's the combination of the two. The juxtaposition of a firm, unshakable awareness of meaning and inestimable preciousness with an unavoidable awareness of senseless suffering and of the precious being distorted, trampled upon, destroyed. That's what breaks our hearts. Thank God it does. That heartbreak is the hallmark of our humanity. And it is one of the ways that we connect with God. More to come. But for now, just note the last stanza of the poem. On high is one aspect of the divine, God as silent, unknown, inaccessible. Below is us, whispering, singing, yearning, working, striving, reaching again and again, loving what is broken, the faded deception, even when it's messy and disappointing, or it's devastating, breaking our hearts. Standing in the gap in prayer. This, too, is an expression of the divine, right here. What we're doing as we rise in body and or spirit for Chatzi Kaddish and our service of Musaf on page 123.